Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Golden Goddess Affirmations live podcast recording. I am the Thoughtful Beast, Trixie Ann. That's my name. And I'm here with the wonderful Manang Kirin. I'm super excited to have her on. I'm very excited for what she's going to talk about, which is our heritage. We have the same heritage. There's an overlap. Yes, Kirin, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you so much, Trixie, for having me on the show. I wanted to actually start off with something because you call me Manang,
Oh,
and
yeah.
for folks who are not familiar, there's all these little things that we do all the time that we don't realize make us so much part of who we are. So Manang
Mhm.
in Ilocano means big sister. So even though Trixie is not related to me by blood, because she sees me as an older sister figure, that's what she calls me. And I don't take that lightly. I have a lot of actual blood cousins, but a lot of folks in our community who refer to me with that same term as well. So I appreciate that, Trixie. I would then refer to her as my ading, which would be like younger sibling.
Mhm.
I am an older sister. I'm the oldest sister, the oldest of a lot of our cousins here too, right? So I mentioned that because that also comes into play. But your first question, okay, so a little bit about myself. First of all, I have a cajillion titles, but that's not what we're talking about today. Right, I know there's a bunch. So if any of you like you saw the bio and all that, I appreciate all that. But first and foremost, I am Igorota. And what that means is my parents are from two of the recognized indigenous peoples in the Philippines. We make up, as a total, indigenous people in the Philippines make up about 9% of the nation. So my mom is from Kalinga and my dad is from Bontok. How about yours, Trixie? Where are your parents from?
Mine is bang it, unless my mom decided to erase my dad's. No, I don't think he did. Yeah, it's bang it, and they're both just bang it.
They're both Benguet.
Yeah.
Are they Kankanay or Ibaloy? You know?
My dad is Kankanaay. I don't know what my mom is.
Okay.
She never said.
So
Definitely dad is Kankanaay because his family speaks Kankanaay.
so you know. So what we're
How I know.
talking so this is actually a big part of today's conversation because even within our folks in the Cordilleras, which are the mountain ranges, the rice terraces that the Philippines are so known for, that's where our folks are from.
Yeah.
And in that area, there are the five major tribes there: Bontok, actually Benguet, I'm sorry, Benguet, and that's broken down into sub-tribes too: Ifugao, Bontok, or Mountain Province, as some people like to call it. We have Apayao and we have Kalinga too. So, one of the foci for today is to really talk about that part of my heritage and how that informs so much of what I do in a
Yeah.
way that I really haven't fully appreciated until this point in my life. Like I didn't
Oh.
realize how Igorota I am, until
Yes.
it's a trip. It's a trip. So that's a quick little story. I live here in San Diego as well. I'm married, have two kids. I'm a professor. I'm a state commissioner. I hold, again, a bunch of different titles. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to do what I need to for the communities that I love.
Yes. Well, that is wonderful. And again, I'm super glad that you are here. I'm very excited um to talk about this because again, like we were just talking before this, like, people don't know what Igorot is, right? Like I think if people hear about Filipino and I feel like ate is heard more because
Yeah.
that's Tagalog, like for older sister and stuff like that, you hear that more. Kuya and ate, older brother, older sister. But I'm like, mine's not that. Like, it's a whole different thing. And it goes into the fact that like the Philippines in itself, like even in our little part, has so much diversity and difference. But then that means like the Philippines as a whole is not just basically Tagalog and the Tinikling. Um, so we'll get into that. Before we get into that, would you mind reading the affirmation you chose for today?
Absolutely. So the affirmation I chose, and I love all of them, by the way, it was really hard for me to decide. But the one I specifically chose was: no one can take away my heritage or history. At the same time, it is up to me to discover and embrace that knowledge.
Yeah. And why did you choose that?
I was looking at your podcast and the topics that you were talking about, and I'm just thinking about so many of the conversations I have out in our community and even in my classrooms that I teach, right?
Mhm.
Um, no matter what it is we do professionally or even in our free time, so much of that really has to do with our sense of self, the
Yeah.
identities that we have. And I'm actually working with a good friend of mine, a thought partner of mine, Ben Nakamura. We're working on this framework as educators and longtime community organizers too. And he's Japanese, so I can say this. We're calling it Sensei. And what that stands for, it's an acronym. It stands for Student Empowerment through Narrative, Storytelling, Engagement, and Identity. And it means teacher too, right?
Ooh,
But
it does.
it does. And the reason we're doing that is because I mean, I tell you, like so many people that I interact with, even if I'm trying to talk about something else, what it always comes back to is, do I have a strong sense of self?
Yes.
Right? It's
Yes.
really difficult to move about any space, especially I think for brown women, or people of color, specifically Black, brown women, Indigenous women. It's really difficult to move around our spaces, knowing that there are multiple identities that we hold, and not feeling like you have to give any of those identities up
Yeah.
to be able to exist and do well
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the world that we live in. I know, right?
Yes. It is a lot. It's a lot. Yes. There and I remember when I was writing that affirmation card, I was thinking, because there's many times, especially just this happened to me fucking last week where I went to this party and it was like a bunch of Filipinos because like it was my friend whose birthday it was, they're Filipino. And even like it wasn't even an Igorot thing, but like a Filipino thing. Like this person's like, oh, how do you know them? Da, da, da. And I was like, oh, I do like these Filipino groups and da da da. And they're like, you don't look Filipino. And then like it was weird. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I get that. I don't know what you want me to say. I have gotten that before. I get that a lot. I don't know. It's weird. But then later came back when I was talking to another Filipino friend and literally went up to that friend and was like, she doesn't look Filipino, huh? She looks like Japanese. And I was just like, why do I feel like I'm 12? And like, it was so weird because I did have that moment where like I am transported back to like middle school.
Oh, what a
And
trip.
like the whole
It happened so fast too, right?
it happened so fast because it
all
was
of a
like I
sudden.
went back into this fucking thing where we had to like introduce ourselves and I was like, I'm Filipino. And like I never finished my introduction because the class went wild and it was like, no, you're not. You don't look Filipino. Are you half? You have to be half. Like this was a class. And so it was just like, oh my, like, and like I've gotten it throughout my life because like my skin is lighter, my eyes look a certain way.
Yeah.
More so than other people's. Anyway, so like but it was just like not having your identity and then having your identity stripped from you. It was like a really fucked up thing. Like it was really fucked up and it fucked me up because I was just like, I don't belong. I already had feelings of not belonging, but then that constant part of my life where I was told like I'm just not Filipino for whatever reason, like that really stuck with me. And then I had this whole thing that I talked about in another podcast where like I was basically doing erasure of myself.
Yeah.
Because I thought I conflated being Filipino, being Igorot, my heritage with me not belonging in general, and then also like intergenerational trauma, basically.
Absolutely.
Like not understanding like why I wanted such different things from my parents, why I just didn't understand my parents, why they couldn't understand me. And so like I thought the right thing to do is push away my heritage. Also, that goes very easily when the whole time we're just trying to assimilate and get good grades.
Right.
And not really have like a voice, just good grades. Just good grades, just good grades. And not make any trouble. So it was really easy. And then so when I wrote that, I was like, yeah, but as I got older, I was like, no. Let me reclaim this. Like that, it's like it's my responsibility. No one can take away who I
Exactly.
am. No one can, but you
Exactly.
can take it away from yourself. So it's like, that's up to you. Like, if you want to be connected to your roots, like, you have to put in the effort, which is very hard and very like, especially like concerning like culture and what you're allowed to talk about, and like the fact that you might have to ask some hard questions, but it really is our responsibility, don't let people like, they can't take it from you, but you can do a really good job trying like taking it away from yourself.
Well, it's interesting you say that because okay, oh my God, you said so much, and I want to make sure I touch on all of them because you said you were talking about how like okay, my husband, for example, he grew up here. Um, he's a lot. He's not a lot. He's gonna laugh. He's about 8 years older, right? And he grew up
Mhm.
here in Benita, down in the more southern San Diego.
Okay.
And yeah, it was still very, very pote. It was very white still at the time that he grew up in the 80s, and even the late 70s, going to elementary school. And his mother was told not to speak to him in any language beside English by the teachers to see, because they thought, and this is wrong, right? Things change. We understand things change. They thought back then that it was harmful to
Yeah.
teach children who didn't look like they were English speaking any other language. Now we know that's wrong. Teach babies as many languages as you can. It is good for the brain. It's good for culture. It's good for their sense of identity. But back then they didn't. And my
Yeah.
mother-in-law, of course, she loves her kids. She thought she was doing the right thing. So
Yeah.
remember, as immigrants, it's all there's all these hyphens that we have in our identities, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
Igorota, you're, even within the Igorot umbrella, like you're Kankana. Anyway,
Yeah.
all these layers and layers of who the fuck we are. And between there too, when we're here in America, that's why it's interesting. Earlier before we started recording, we were talking about different languages. Like in the Philippines, there's over 100 languages.
Yeah.
And for you and I, Tagalog was not one of them. Ilocano is actually the mainstream language that my parents taught. My parents both speak Kalinga and Natunin. I only understand Ilocano because that's what they primarily spoke at home. But when they immigrated here to San Diego, they spoke Tagalog so that they can communicate with the other Filipinos here,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So that's another layer of identity. Um, Now, I love your affirmation because you're saying no one can take away my heritage or history, even though this isn't necessarily our story. What I always remember and think about when I do think about the indigenous people who are indigenous here, like here in San Diego, the Kumeyaay, right? When we think about the people who are indigenous to what we now know as the United States, there were literal efforts to strip away their culture. The Indian
Yep.
boarding schools
Yep.
literally were designed for actual and cultural genocide because,
Yeah.
again, they thought if we can make these people more American,
Yeah.
then they're less likely to fight us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, even you're feeling like you had to be a certain way and less of another way, less you. That is a very systemic thing, too. Like, our parents wanted us to make sure we do well here.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So I was pointing and I realized that people listening to the podcast could not see me pointing. So I was also one of the children. My brother and I also got pamphlets and stuff sent
Yeah.
home telling our parents not to teach us any other languages because it was going to mess up our grades. And I remember I learned that when I was older in middle school because I asked my mom why they didn't teach us like their own language, and
Yeah.
she said that she's like, well,
They told me
they
not to.
sent yeah, they told me not to. They sent pamphlets from home, and also like your dad and I speak English well. There wasn't like she's like, you have to understand, like, for us, there wasn't a need. There's other immigrants who they don't speak English well, but we were taught English in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you have
Exactly.
the
That's the
people
same thing.
here telling us
Mhm.
it will ruin your education. So there literally was no need then. We didn't, and we were told against, like, they didn't, you know, it'd be a little different, like, if they were here and they didn't speak English at all, then they're like, then we would have to teach you, but they're like, that doesn't apply to a lot of Filipinos. They came here knowing English. So it
Already.
was easy to erase all of our languages like that much more. Because if you think about other people who come,
Yeah.
like other Asian cultures who came and stuff like that, they didn't know English because they're not like the Philippines who were like where we were nationals. And
Right.
like you know, like it's the history matters into why. And so it's just like, you know, that sucked. That sucked.
It is, you know, and it is interesting when you look at respectively like how the different people from, you know, Asia really immigrated over, and your observation of how, like in the Philippines, right, a lot of the education was actually taught in English.
Mhm.
So you're right, we're almost primed to still hold on to that. But that's the funny thing. Back in the Philippines, yeah, they learned in English, but they still spoke the other languages too.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, when they come here, there was this thought of not, you know, not teaching us. Now, I will say my parents, they didn't, they did not intentionally hold anything else back from me. So I can still understand Ilocano. And it's harder for me to generate the words on my own, but I can still understand it pretty well.
Mhm.
But my brain thinks in other, because I took several years of Spanish too, so my brain wants to respond in like Espan Locano English. Like it's this
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
hot mess of different languages. But anyway, going back to what you're saying, like we forget, you know, again, why it's so important to try to reclaim culture. And a lot of the younger folks that I speak to, and even folks my age, right? I'm 46, so a lot of folks that I speak to, even my own peers, and then are the generations after us, they're trying to reclaim what they
Mhm.
feel like was withheld from them. This was a big topic of conversation at this conference I was just at the San Diego County Office of Education. And it wasn't just the Asian folks saying it, even Latinx folks were saying it too.
Mm.
Yeah, that there, for some of them, you know, there was just this sense of like, we got to be good Americans to survive here. But you've got these generations who are like, well, actually, I want to know where we're from. I do want to learn language. I do want to know custom. I do want to know tradition.
Where do you
So
think that surge for change is coming? Or like why now? Why do you think that's happening now?
this need for reclamation,
Mhm.
because trying to act American isn't working. If it was, then everybody would be like good and jolly and happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I also think too, no matter what space you move around. I mean, look at us. Look at us. Like we're obviously something. We're obviously
You're
like
obviously not
we're
white.
not
It's just
white,
like
you know?
whatever that is, it's not white.
Right.
Yeah, that's not something.
You and I are on the golden goddess spectrum, like we are something. And so
Yeah.
you can't hide that. And I think too that and it really makes me happy. Like I'm, you know, just seeing different cultures, not just even Asian, not just even Filipino or Igorota, but I'm seeing just so many other different communities just reclaiming themselves, right? Like being like, I am this, this is who I am. And having that pride and rejecting these forced other cultural norms that don't quite fit. They just don't fit. Like if you look at, okay, I hate to bring it back to a very simplistic thing, like individualism versus collectivism, right? It's so hard when people, you know, like the mantra, like just take care of yourself, make sure you're good, take care. That
Mhm.
that it just doesn't work for us. That's not what we're taught. You know
Yep.
what I mean? We
Yeah.
come from cultures that very much stress the collective, stress the tribe. I mean, you and I both grew up in BBAC organizations, which are are international Igorot organizations. I can't just think about myself. And honestly, it's hard for me to do that. Like, I don't know how to only think about my life without thinking about how my actions impact other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's okay. So that is a generational strength. I just want to say that because it's a generational strength. Because, you know, I think about a lot. I think about myself a lot. I think about my shit that I go through a lot and how like you know, I have PTSD, so I think about trauma a lot and what that means. And intergenerational trauma. And then like one of my big problems is like um my it's this is like the interesting part. My identity is very swept into my identity in my family, like my nuclear family.
Right.
And you know, sometimes if you go too much one way, then you pay the price of like, you know, that saying like, you know, like I burn myself to keep other people warm. And
Yeah.
then it's yeah, and it's only till recently where I realize maybe one of the roots for where this comes from is actually a strength, but
Yeah.
because I haven't talked about it, because
Yeah.
it hasn't been like discussed and stuff, it's actually just unfortunately because I'm not exploring it that way, it's only becoming something that hurts me because it's just like, no, I can't um I can't just think about myself, and that doesn't necessarily need to be an inherently bad thing at all, but
Sure.
but like that's like the weird part, right? Like it this really could have been turned into me very earlier on like a generational strength. And
Yeah.
I think it is a generational strength. It's just unfortunately when it also comes into survival mode and you're here with
Yes.
your family, then survival
Absolutely.
mode makes everything really like intense and not like originally what it's supposed to be. And
Sure.
so it like that survival mode can turn that strength into trauma instead. It's just
Oh,
very interesting. You know, like you can go either way or both ways at
there's
the
a
same
thin
time.
line.
Yeah.
So there is there's oh my gosh, there's a book that several of us are in, several of us Filipinas are in. It's edited by my dear friends DJ Cotton Candy and Amanda Solomon and Jennifer. Oh my God, Jennifer, I'm sorry, I can't remember your last name at the moment, but there are several of us in this book, and it's all on what it means to be Pinay, right?
Mhm.
And when I read through the stories, what I always think of is like, including you, Trixie, I don't know any Filipina who has not ripped out her own heart loving everybody else.
Yeah.
All of us, all of us, all that's what we're trained and raised to do.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting. Like you,
Yeah.
like on one hand, I love that because when I get that love back, it is usually from other women. So you got to remember that too, right? That's I think that's one of the purposes of your podcast, and I'm really happy that you're doing this, is because if you talk to any woman about these experiences, they'll all tell you the same thing. So it's important that we remind each other, like, you're not alone in this shit. You
Yeah.
know, you go through shit. Like so many of us go through shit, and we're still strong externally because again, that's another trait of ours, right? We have to be great, we have to love, and we do love, we love so strong, but you still have to do so with grace and gratitude, you know, and all this shit.
With a
um
smile.
and you smile and you do it, and again, like again, I love that about our culture, and at the same time, whoo, it's fucking exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausting. So you do have to learn, like you know, you can't pour from an empty cup, and you've ripped your heart out already. Like what's left for you? You're gonna bleed
Yeah.
out. You're
Yeah.
gonna bleed out. So you still have to know what your limits are.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So, I wanna ask you how you found those limits for yourself.
Well, that's a great question, girl. I'm still trying to find those limits. Like, but I mean, you know, it's so funny. Anybody who knows me, I just do too much shit, right? People are always like, God, Corinne, you do too much shit. I'm like, yeah, I know, I do too much shit. Um, but I make sure that it's things that I have energy for, because you know, I've got two boys who are like growing up just exponentially before my eyes. You know, my older son Roman, he's only 15. He's already like fucking like a foot taller than me. He's wearing size 11 men's shoes. Are expensive that shit is. Like, they're growing up so fast, and I feel like I just blinked, and like my kids are big. I'm like, oh my God, like time goes by really fast all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Like, I remember growing up, so stupid. Like, I remember growing up going like, I can't wait to be older. Girl, now I'm like, oh my God, can I just slow shit down real fast? So I really can't be too many places at once. I get tired. Like, I need my sleep. I actually get like at least 6 to 7 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
I need that. I really, it's funny because I turned 40 and I was like, I want to do something crazy, right? So I started bodybuilding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. I started competing when I was 42. Never did that. You're kidding me? I never did that shit before. But again, I knew that I needed to do something for my own health. Like, I've also worked in healthcare, and if you actually look at the health disparities and the health conditions of Filipinos, especially here in San Diego, we have so many issues of diabetes and heart disease and chronic health conditions. Like, and I'm seeing so many of my peers, growing up, I lost friends to drive-bys. I lost friends to prison. And now in my 40s, I'm losing friends to freaking health issues. And I'm losing my friends to mental illness too.
Yeah.
I don't say suicide. I say I lost them to mental illness because they didn't get the help that would have helped them, or they came so far that they felt like, ending life was the only option they had. So I'm really big on like, I am not going to go out like that. I am not going to go out like that. Something that I could have prevented.
Yeah. How do you, and I guess, have you had those kind of conversations like within your family? And if you have, like, how does that go? Like introducing mental health, like talking about mental health. Like, I unfortunately like also have like suicide in my family, and it was like something that was never spoken about. I think it's still odd because I'm old now, and I don't even know if they realize that I know the truth behind some certain deaths. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just like they're so painful, and like, but they would have been important to talk about because mental illness, like there are things you can do. There are things that are available that people really like realize that aren't available to them. And it is very true that there are not enough therapists yet. They're not, especially culturally competent ones. But people don't even know that like clinics exist, right? They don't know that clinics exist. You don't have to, you can go to a clinic. There are like mental health clinics everywhere. There are like so many of them, and it's easier sometimes to get help, like professional help there. But they don't, but people don't even think that that's a pathway because we're not taught.
No. So your question is the first question of have I talked to my family? So I have to. I'm very fortunate that I have. I can't say who because they'll kill me. Because again, here's the thing: like any culture from Asia, right? There's still like this big thing of like, oh, and I hate to actually be buying into it right now, but they're very concerned with what people think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like my mom being Kalinga, just a small example, being Kalinga, she's very particular about like when they come to your house, you gotta feed them, you feed everybody, right? They offer them to sleep over. Like hospitality is a really big thing in Kalinga culture. It was so funny because my grand uncle, Lolo Mike Sugiao, he wrote a book on Kalinga culture, and in there he says like a partner who does not properly practice Kalinga hospitality can be divorced. Like you can be like, you know what? You're not a good Kalinga hostess. Like you suck. Like so it's that serious, right? But I will say someone very close to me in my family has gone to group therapy.
Oh, see?
Yeah, and I was like, oh shit, are you serious? Yeah. So number one, I will say, to have some hope, but earlier we were talking about languages too. Mental health, girl, is a whole language that was not taught in the Philippines.
Yep.
Still not taught. Like I was looking up like if someone wanted a referral in the Philippines, right? Where would they go? There's only one, and anybody in the Philippines, please correct me. From what I remember, there's only one healthcare facility in the entire country that even provides mental health. And I've heard stories of like people who are counselors, and I don't even know that they're, I don't know that they have like a licensing board over there, but the way when they do try to conduct therapy, they have to do it so secretively. Like they're hiding in fucking like back rooms to give therapy to people because again, we have so much stigma around talking about when we're struggling.
Yeah.
And so many of our people are struggling. And that's another reason why I also think that our younger folks are trying to reclaim culture because they're trying to find something to hold on to. They're trying to find like what the good parts of being Filipino.
Yes. What are the good parts?
They're trying, because you hear a lot about like the complaints. And I'm like, but God, we're such a look at that country has gone through 400 fucking years of occupation. You know what I mean? Like not up in the mountains, but for our other Filipinx siblings, like that's a real thing. And that generational trauma that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, especially if they know that they had families who were killed by Spanish or Americans or even the Japanese during World War II, like that shit stays with people,
Yeah.
But it's really difficult to talk about it because our parents' generation did not have the language. And then here we are here in the US going like, I think I'm depressed. And what are the common things that we hear? And I actually had, shout out to Salon Filipina because they had me go talk to like 2,500 high school students one year.
Oh, what? That's cool.
All over the county in the Filipino language classes. And I would ask this question, as a parent, it kind of breaks my heart, but I would ask this question of the kids. I go, okay, how many of you, if you feel like you're struggling, sad, having issues, how many of you feel like you can talk to your parents? And out of a class of like 30, how many of you think raise their hands?
0.
Like 1, 2.
Really? Dude, yeah. I'm surprised. I feel like
I know, at least there's some, right? Like at least there's like one or two. And I'm thinking, oh my God, and you guys are my kids' age. And so you're telling me like
that's rough.
Right, that's fucked up. Like my own peers still don't know. And I talk about this with my homies too. And I have so many shout outs to give, but like shout out to Asian Solidarity Collective, to Candy and Candy and Rhea are like two of my best friends, and another group, Only Stronger, with the Kuya and Gary and Izzy. Like these are two different groups that are really trying to break this cultural norm of not talking about hurt. Yeah. And not talking about struggle. Because if we can't even fucking talk about it, that's when we start losing our people.
Yeah.
And that's how we have lost our people, And you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be a fucking therapist to just be there for somebody.
No.
See, and that's another thing, right? It's crazy. Like, here's the beautiful part that I love about it, regardless of where in the Philippines you're from. Like, say, like when someone has like a financial issue, or not even financial issue, like when a family's going through like a death.
Yeah.
Like some kind of acceptable hard time. Yeah. Everybody comes through.
Yeah.
Everybody drops off food. Like when we grieve, it's ironic because I think we see the most love sometimes when someone dies.
Oh, for sure. So I don't know if you also experienced this, if this happened in BBOC San Diego though, but because like a big part of the BBOC, like you pay your membership fees and then like it comes back. Like if someone passes away, that's where the fees go to, like to help with that burden of that financial burden.
Yeah.
Because apparently it costs a shit ton to die.
Oh yeah, it's like $10,000 for a fucking casket, dude.
So it's just like, so it's rough. So there's that, and then I just have so many. Like, it is odd, but like it really is like so many beautiful memories during funerals, like in the BBOC, because everybody comes to the wakes. They print out fucking papers with all the songs so that everyone is like singing. Yes. Oh my, right? Like everyone is singing. Everyone is singing. There are like I don't know if like one of the uncles or aunties keeps all these stacks of papers or they print it out every time, but it's just like every time, here
Yep.
are the stacks of the songs that we're all gonna sing together for the next several days. You know, it's like several days, and then everyone brings food because it's like
Oh, it's so
potluck and stuff like that.
fun.
And I remember there was this one, I don't, I was at one wake and like the people who work there like came up to me and I was like a little kid and they're like, why can everyone sing? This is so beautiful. Because, you know, everyone's also singing in harmony. There's like at least a third, if not like the third and the fifth happening. If you don't hear a whole chord, there will at least be
Right.
like people singing the third. And so like it's like, but that's and the sad, obviously they're all sad, but like literally with all the funerals and bebop and stuff like that, I associate it with so much fucking love because everyone comes back for like as many days of the wakes that they can. Even if it's a freaking work day, they freaking drive. They're like, well, we're here, you know, like we're here. We brought food and we're singing from this packet together. Like, and it's like, yeah,
It's a
yeah,
trip. It's a
it is
trip.
a trip.
See, and that's such a cultural thing for us, right? Funerals and weddings, like weddings and funerals, like especially for our folks, and you know everybody in the Philippines, but with the girls, man, like you know, people take that shit so seriously. Like it's so many days. It's you know we have to offer up the proper atang, which is like your offering for the folks who passed away. And then depending, like Tankanai folks are really particular. Like, everybody's really particular, but there's certain kinds of foods you give, and then certain kind of wine you drink. Like it becomes a full out kanya, which in our language means gathering for the Nani girls out there. But that's what happens, and you know like that. So I got it. I think I know we're talking about mental health, but we're really, I know we're going like all the way off the rails, but like you said, you know, during those moments when we're gathering like that's when we're so good at oh, that's right. We're so good at coming together in that way, right?
Mhm.
Imagine if we did that when someone's like depressed,
Yeah.
when, you know, when someone's having a hard time. Um, I founded a nonprofit, Asian Pacific Islander Community Actions, and with PICA, with ASC, we have host these mental health forums. And a big part of those forums is this concept of communal care.
Mm.
And I've actually written a paper too with 12 other scholar social workers. So shout out to my Atang de Cuentos folks. Um, we were talking about like, and some of us are licensed therapists. My good friend Ree, she's an LCSW, she's a licensed clinical therapist, right? But there's still that piece. Number one, like you said, we don't have enough therapists, and even if you get one, it's like a good 1 to 2 months wait. But there's this other piece of our culture that I think we forget to weave in, and that's how you come through for each other.
Mhm.
You know, like that, like you said, when we're able to gather together, and that's why so many of us had an extra rough time during lockdown, during pandemic, because we're not meant to be alone.
Nope. Nope.
We're
That was
fucking
fucked up.
human. Yeah, we're not fucking meant to be, especially if you're someone like Igorot, like you know, I've never grew up in a quiet house. Like to this day, I can't, like even when I travel so much for work, but even when I sleep in a hotel room, a quiet hotel room by myself, like it's so hard for me because I'm not used to being alone in a
Yeah.
structure. I've always had people around me, right? So that piece, um, and shout out again to folks like Kuya Ron, the who owns Good Life Tattoo. He runs these men's circles where he
Oh.
gathered. Yeah, I know, like dudes my age and older, right? Like come together and they talk about like how they're doing and how they're feeling, and big ups to Emo Brown and Vision Culture too, because they've all kind of partnered together to do these different groups. So like for the men to be doing that,
Yeah, dude.
you know. Yeah, because I know, like, if I have an issue, I can call you, I can call my girls, I can be like, hey, I'm like, I need to fucking talk. But do guys do that? I don't know. But we're trying to
Yeah,
teach them to. So you know, we're seeing like this need for and the opportunity for folks like you and I and this podcast and all to kind of reteach to teach the generations, even the generations before us. Because when we did these mental health forums, girl, I can't tell you how happy I was when the aunties and uncles showed up.
Yeah, dude. That's like the question. It's how do you get the aunties and uncles to show up? Like,
They
for
came.
real.
They
Yeah.
came, and I was like, oh, it's like I heard the heavens sing, like, oh, like the fucking aunties. Well, one in the very first form that we did in Skyline, and every time we've done this 3 times, and they've all maxed out the room. Like so many people come through because people do want to talk about it, they just don't know how. So being able to
Yeah.
gather people who, yes, are professionally trained, but also we fucking get it because this is our culture too, coming together and talking about it. When we did the first one, Auntie Virginia Hewitt, who is the mother of my friend from high school, Rudy, who we did lose to bipolar depression, unfortunately. She opened up the forum for us. And we were very strategic about having her speak because she said, when he was suffering, she didn't know what to say to him.
Yeah.
She would tell him to pray.
Yeah.
And he was hospitalized. Like, he did what he could. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough for him at that point. But it was so important for me to have someone from her generation to be there and say it and talk about it. And it, slowly but surely, we hopefully will get there. But you also have to start where people are, right? Like, some aunties and uncles are willing to talk about it, and some just no, 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 like they just won't.
Yeah. But honestly, that's so good to hear because like if you look at like Filipino suicide rates for like young people, like it's not good. It's like that's a thing that's happening. Like we're losing people to mental illness.
We are.
And so the fact that people are starting to turn around, like that's why it's important for them too. That's why I'm super not sold on this, like just let the older generations go. Just let, just like whatever, you can't change them. I'm like, no, this cannot be the way because one, they're still affected by it, whether it's just them themselves or, their kids, their grandkids are going through something. Like this is real for everyone.
Yep.
And so the better we can get everyone on board, the better it will be. Because also I'm just like when I think about, the younger generation, when I think about Gen Z and stuff, I think about like, we talk about language a lot, giving language to them so that they understand how to communicate. But how fucking stressful will this be if they have language and then their parents don't have this language? So now they can't communicate anyways. It's like, now they're just more aware of how far they are instead of getting closer, like it has to go both ways. It just does, and like maybe the younger generation like has more of the language or mental health and stuff, and maybe the older generation has more of the culture and how it weaves together.
Yes.
But if you don't get both, it's just not gonna work out. Like I just think about like making younger people more aware of how fucked they are if we just only focus on them, because it's like talking to a wall. Then it's just like, that's not cool. I don't feel like I'm setting you up for success if I'm just saying it's all on you.
Right.
Like that, because that's a super burnout forever. If you think you're the only one responsible for your family's mental health, guess what? You're gonna have horrible mental health because that's so much guilt. There's so much guilt and responsibility. You're like, oh God, it's up to me only.
That's too much to carry. That yeah, that's too much. And for the younger folks who are wondering, like, if even if it's not your parents, do you have that younger auntie who's more open-minded? Maybe is there anybody like your mom's friend? You know what I'm saying? Like your cool uncle, whatever. Like, is there anybody who can help liaison between you and your parents when need be?
Yeah.
You got to find those champions. And then, I mean, I know, like what I tell my peers, right? Like my friends who are parents too, because we're looking old now. What I keep telling them is like, look, dude, if your kid has an issue, would you rather they go to some fucking stranger who might not actually care about them, or do you want them to come to you? Like, do you think being harder on them because our parents were hard on? See, that's another thing we have to break, right? A lot of us, and I'm speaking to my generation, my Gen X folks, like we were raised a certain way because our parents were raised a certain way because our parents were raised a certain way. We feel like you have to perpetuate that. Your kids are not you. You got to let them be themselves. You can't, what worked for you doesn't mean like that's going to work for your kid. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
for me, for like working out, I fucking love working out. I love lifting weights. Like, I love the sweat. I love that shit. Most people don't love that shit. You
Yeah,
know?
most people hate that shit.
They're
They're
like,
like,
how
"What
do
the
you
fuck,
enjoy
Corinne?"
this? But that's what works for me. But I don't expect that from somebody else, you know? Like I don't want my two sons feeling like they can't come to me or to my husband when shit's going south for them. You know what I mean?
Just
So
because they don't pump as much as their mom.
exactly. I'm like, look, you really don't gotta be like me. But even that, just being able to like listen,
Yeah.
listen without, and that's so hard, I think, for just a lot of people to just listen without being like, why are you sad? Or like for you, that's fucked up for somebody to be like, you're not Filipino. That's like when people tell someone like they're depressed, and the reaction is, well, why are you depressed? You have a roof
Yeah.
over your head. I'll
Yeah.
give you a reason to cry.
But you look fine. Oh my God, I'll give you a reason to cry.
Yeah, you hear,
Right? You look
we all heard that.
fine. Nothing. Yeah, we all super hit. Why are you crying?
Why are you
Huh?
crying? I give you a real reason to
Yeah,
cry.
and you're like, oh no.
You don't know real suffering. And you're right. Yes, I did not walk 10 miles to school barefoot eating dirt, like I
Yeah.
didn't, but
But also, I thought, one, like, isn't that the point of us being here? So I didn't have to do that. And
ew.
like, and again, this is why, oh my God, we can go like this forever. But this is why it's like important. Like when you were speaking, I was like, yeah, you do got to find that champion. And sometimes the champion is going to be like your gossipy aunt or uncle. We like to gossip. So find the gossiper in your family, because sometimes if you can't reach like your mom or dad, someone else might know why. And
Exactly.
it's so odd because, again, everyone is really different, but sometimes knowing why your parents are the way they are and they treat you the way they treat you, I mean, it doesn't take away what they did that hurt you,
Sure.
but actually knowing why and understanding, honestly, that's better than not having anything.
Yeah.
Because you can at least you have something to understand and digest.
Yeah.
And then because you have that knowledge, then you don't have to repeat it yourself, instead of just like guessing why and not knowing why. And then you don't get to know why ever. And then you repeat this trauma because you don't know. You don't know either. Because
Yeah.
no one ever told you and no one explained to you. And like, it's easy. Like, it's just really easy to perpetuate the same shit that was like taught.
And you don't
It's just
even
easy.
realize you're
No,
doing it
you
sometimes.
don't know. You
You
don't
don't
know.
even realize you're doing it. I know. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a truth. See, and that's another thing, right? Like in anything, like you can't have an ego, especially in the most important relationships that you've got. Like you hear that term like unconditional love, but you really have to be able to just like to check yourself. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'll say one thing too, like for the folks who have a harder time like communicating with older generations. Again, like it doesn't have to fall on you, but one thing that you might be able to do is to model the behavior that you wish you had. Like how
Yeah.
many of you, like when you come home, right? Like how many of you sit down with your parents and just go like, how are you doing, mom? How was your day, dad? Like to just
Yeah.
literally ask them, like, how are you? Because that's what we would love, right? We would love someone just to be like, hey, you're right. Like, how are you doing? You might not always be ready for the answer, but to be able to model that, like, it doesn't have to be like this all out deep ass conversation all the time. But even these
Yeah.
little check-ins, like, how are you doing? Or I really like when you did that the other day, or just take them out for coffee or boba, like just and fuck
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
You got to balance out the drama with good shit.
Yeah. You do.
It's hard.
You do. It
You
is
got to
hard.
try. Yeah.
Okay, and with that, I
Tell me about
would
it.
like
Buddy.
we've been going. So
Nice.
with that, I want to talk about a little bit more about our heritage and kind of
Yeah.
celebrate it a little bit. So this is a question I wrote down for you, but I wanted to be like, I asked Kirin, we have a sheet that we're loosely not following. Where I asked you, what was my question? It was just like, what does what does being Igorota mean to you? And what does it like smell like? Basically, I wanted to know like what are your memories? If you think of being Igorota, like what comes in your mind? Like what senses arise?
I love that. I loved that question. Because I don't think we always think of it in that way, like how much of culture and heritage, like it becomes part of your senses, right? Like
Yeah.
we're very physical. Like I'm a very physical person. Um, and so when I think about, what it means to be Igorot, I think of several things. I think about the smell of pinikpikan. I think about, and that's a fresh chicken for those who may not know. You can look it up. I think about the sound of gongs all the
Yeah.
time, like the music, right? The rhythm, what our music sounds like. I think of bonfires. I smell fire all the time. Like my parents have a bonfire pit. Like we do that every time people come over to the house. Like I think, tactile wise, I think about these beads that I'm wearing, right? That come from Kalinga. I think about the textures that both of my lolas were master weavers. That means they taught other people in the tribes.
Oh,
Yeah, they
cool.
were backstrap weavers. So I think about the looms. I think about the fabric. I think about the betel nut that my lola used to chew. Yeah, I do. I think about the betel nut because she used to chew that all the time. I think about the oil that my Lola would always use to massage.
Dude, did she have healing hands too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude.
Several of the bebop LA aunties, because she lived in LA for a bit, were like, I have your cousin, blah, 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 because Lola did ilot for me the other day. So yeah, she was one of those. So I think about the oil that she had used. I think about my other Lola braiding my hair. I think about like the scar that my paternal Lolo had from World War II. He was one of those that was part of the United States Far East Army, and were promised all these rights as supposed American nationals, but were lied to essentially and taken away.
Yeah.
So I think about that. I mean, like you said, I think about the gatherings. I think about the food. I think about the cackling,
Oh my God.
Like right now, we fucking cackle, right? Like Filipinos, that's not just an Igorota thing. Like Filipinos can't fucking cackle. Like we can't laugh like normal humans. We gotta cackle. I love that sound. Cackling is, and it was funny during pandemic. I would look through my Facebook at like videos of my mom and aunties cackling because I missed it so fucking much because we couldn't gather. So I think about all those things. Like, and that's so, like, all of those are so woven into my senses.
Can you point out your mom in a group cackle? I
can
point out my
hear
mom
from 2 miles away.
It's like so odd to be like, oh, my mom's here.
Yeah.
Right. Like I went to the Kanya and I was like, my mom is here. I don't know where yet, but I just heard her.
Like, I was cracking up because I met your parents, but it was funny because I remember like when I went up to the Kanya and up in the Bay, and I was like, that's got to be Trixie's parents because you look just like them, girl. So anyway.
I'm a mix of them. I am a straight up mix of them. Yeah. For me, like, okay, like the whole gong thing.
Yeah.
So this is a thing that I didn't realize like was just an Igorot thing until I think I was in high school or some shit, maybe college, where it's just like, we have gongs at our party. That is not, I feel like when people think about Filipino parties and they think about food, and that is true. That is true for everybody. There is an extra amount of food for no reason.
Right.
Like, and now we've gotten to the point where like our families are buying like to-go boxes, to go, because it used to be just the Ziploc bags. And now people are upgrading, just like actual.
Yeah, they're fancy. Yep.
Yeah, they're fancy now. But the whole thing with gongs, like that's an Igorot thing, like gongs. Like at every birthday party I had growing up, there was gongsa playing.
Of course.
There's fucking gongsa playing. There's like, and it's so funny because my fiance Joey was talking about, because I brought him to the kanyao and I brought him to the parties and stuff, and how basically the kanyao is the parties, but just in the formal wear. They're like these are the same dances you did the night before.
And then
it's
we
the
did them
same
again at
dances
the park the next
at
day.
the
Yes.
park the next day. And it's like, it's true though. Like it's so funny because of like, but this is how we party. And it's so different. And I didn't realize like, you know, I mean, I have not gone to like another Filipino party and see people dance their cultural dances. I've honestly only ever seen the tinikling ever done at a performance. Like I've never seen it done at people's backyards. Like, but this is what we literally did in our backyard, like from when I was little.
I'm so happy you said that because that's something that, you know, like with IKAT, right? With Indigenous knowledge, art and truth. So shout out Jojo, Mark, Nicole, Marge, Carrie. That's something that we always have to explain, right? To a lot of like the culture night folks and other performance groups. It's like, this is not a performance for us.
This is just how
this is our shit.
Yeah.
Like you said, this is what we did on my birthday. This is what we did on my wedding. Like, this is what we do at the funerals. Like, you're right. Like, I think a lot of groups, you know, there is a difference. Like they learn and they perform. And I'll say, like, I think like you and I, you know, we're so blessed and privileged because we have that.
Yeah. We had that.
We
don't have that.
People don't have that.
No.
But they try to take it and it's not theirs. But that's our shit. Like, that's our shit. And you know, but I really don't take that for granted. And you're right, like that. Like when I was in like sixth grade, and my Lola came out of the garage, and my other girlfriends were there, right? And my Lola came out the garage, and she got full on kalinga, she got full on batok, she's tatted, and my friends were like, "I've never seen a grandma with tattoos," and I'm like, I know, right? Like it's just. Girl, we're just different. I'm not saying we're any better, any less. No. It is just fucking different. Like we don't do mahjong. We don't do we just don't. It's different.
It's the same. And we have an obsession with also country music, which also is very specific. Like Joey, my fiance, again, look this up. My fiance is a white man, and he looked this up because he's like, why do you guys love country road? Like, right? Like you saying that earlier, like that is literally. It's that's weird. Like that's yes, it's in Igorot thing is fucking country road.
Country roads and Levi's. I don't fucking know why.
Levi's. Yeah, and he looked it up and it's literally it is specific to us. Levi's and country music and like Igorots. Yeah, and cats. Like literally specifically to us. And I just it's so funny because like I just think of Uncle Conrad. Like our Uncle Conrad like sings like you know, he sings all the Western music and stuff like that. And it's so funny because you'll come to this Igorot party and here will be like this man like who sounds like he was in a Western like movie singing these songs. But this is an Igorot man.
Our uncle, I don't know if you're Uncle Bob. Shout out Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob Olympic. He got a CD, girl. He put out a CD. Baba. I love that shit. I love it. It's so and I remember asking my parents one day, I asked them, I'm like, why are you girls so into country music? And my dad's like, because we're cowboys. Like, okay. But okay, girl, okay. But in the backyard, right? Like, we don't give a fuck about HOAs.
No.
I didn't say this, but like one of the sounds I always think of, like, and I hate it, but like this, like when they're preparing the lechon, when they're preparing the caldereta, which is goat, like the animals came in like fresh, alive, and then they end up in the pots.
Yeah.
Like, we had when we were preparing for one of the Igorot games, they have like these games that they do down here. Sports Fest, they call it Sports Fest. And this goes back to the mountains too. I know we're almost at time, but so we were preparing for Sports Fest once, and they were preparing like 20 of the uncles were preparing like 2 cows in my parents' backyard, right? Like parents' backyard tends to be like that house, right? It's like the Pengroso house up north. The Ameling house is the equivalent. And something happened, and these paramedics had to show up because something happened. Paramedics showed up, and like, girl, we had tarps of like flesh and blood. Like there are these The good thing is, this is what I love about living in California and San Diego. The majority of the paramedics were Mexican. And they came into that back. I was like, oh fuck, these paramedics are gonna show up. They're gonna call safety and be like, oh, there's a lot of butchering back here that's not permitted. But they were like, yeah, we're Mexican. We do the same thing. I was like,
yeah, dude.
San Diego. Like, talk about solidarity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude.
Yes,
that's how that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that other people like go through that shit. I had one of my good friends. He is Tagalog. When he came to my parents' backyard, he saw the chicken coop. He saw my Lola weaving. He saw like the itag, the dried pork. I don't know if your dad does this. They like dried pork off the rafters of the ceiling. Yeah. And my friend Mary was like, yeah, you guys are different Filipinos, huh? I was like, yeah.
It is. Yes, it's very different.
It's
okay.
very different.
I know we're over, but I do want to if you could answer quick away. Maybe I did want to ask you, like, and you did touch on it when you talked about community care before, but being Igorota, being an Igorot woman, and how that is different, like, or like, the two different parts of, you're an American woman as well.
Sure.
And how does that differ for you? Or what are these two experiences living hand in hand? Because you also immigrated here, right? So you were actually born.
I was born in Kalinga.
You were born in Kalinga. You come here, and now you are a scholar in America.
Yeah. But it's a trip because, again, like when non-Filipinos meet me, they automatically like assume I'm Tagalog, or that I understand Tagalog. And my students are the best. You're so sweet. So I love y'all at San Diego City College. I had students email me during Lunar New Year and they're like, happy Lunar New Year, professor. I'm like, oh, thank you, but I don't celebrate Lunar New Year. Well, my friends do, and I'm really happy for them. Like, that ain't me though, bro. So there are layers, and sometimes it does take energy, but it takes that extra explaining of like, actually, and I say it really quickly. I'm like, there's about 100 different languages and ethnicities in the Philippines. I happen to be one of the indigenous ones. So I don't understand Tagalog. And then having to explain that to other Filipinos is a trip. Like I'll have aunties be like, how come you don't understand Tagalog? And I'm like, because my parents aren't Tagalog. I can understand Ilocano, but my parents speak Ilocano, Tagalog, English, Kalinga, Natunen. Those who my people are. So even having to educate other people, from the same country that we're from too, but having to educate them on the diversity of just the fucking Philippines, which I think is a beautiful thing. Like, it's so funny how many people always have these conversations of like, what does it mean to be Filipino? I'm like, dude, that's on you. It's however you want to fucking define it. Like, don't let, like with you, right? Like when someone was like, oh, you don't look Filipina. Like, how dare they? Well, what are you supposed to look like, right? Like more like me, because I'm darker and and that's still fucked up. Like there's no one thing.
There's not. And like, and just mentioning it lightly too, like there's the IKATs. There's like the Philippines, and the spectrum of our skin is very different. It's just people are only used to what they see. And even with what they see on TFC right now, I'm like, girl, no one is that color naturally. Like,
nobody's nose look like that naturally.
Yeah, like that's not okay, but like that's what people are exposed to, and so that's what they know. And so like I don't know. I really like that we're talking about this. I was like, Grin's like, what about Igorota-ness? And I was like, yes, we're doing that because it is so specific. And like I hope for the people like listening at home and stuff like know that, like not just for like Filipinos, but whatever culture you're from, like knowing that, hey, you might have more to your history than just, especially like as an American, like as an Asian American or Filipino American, like you might have more history to you than that. Yeah. You might be indigenous blood. You might be mixed blood. You might be from like a different place that doesn't actually claim like the big, the bigger country as like theirs. Like, you might be like Taiwanese and you don't recognize China, or there's different stuff like that. And there's different aspects to your heritage. And like that will always come into play into your life, whether you know it or not, because it will end up explaining some shit to you.
And own that, people. Like, you need to own that shit. Like, I think a lot of, like, there are a lot of people who are very drawn to Igorot culture because there are these, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like, you have people who viewed us as savages and brought us here to the World's Fair and displayed
Yup.
us with fucking, like that. We didn't even get to touch on that, right? Maybe we need to do another one, girl, but there's that. But then on the flip side of that, you have people who romanticize Igorot culture. They go get the tattoos that are only supposed to be earned and worn by those who are approved and recognized as warriors. Like, you don't just wake up one day and be like, I'm gonna get a tribal. Fuck no, you don't do that. Like, you have to be given permission to get that shit. Then you need to find someone who's willing to give it to you.
Mhm.
Like, there's all these things, right? So I think, for folks who are rightfully so and understandably so looking for culture, like, own your own shit. Like, if you are from Manila, if you are Tagalog, like, own that shit. My God, there's so much richness in the Tagalog culture alone too. Like, you don't need anything else that you think feels more authentic. Like, that's what drives me crazy. I think a lot of people feel like, I've heard people say, oh, but Igorots are the real Filipinos or the authentic. I know, and I'm like, I don't know, that kind of, I don't. So does that mean that you're not?
Yeah,
Does that mean
that's
that
really
you're any
weird.
lesser? I don't think so. Like, why is that the attitude? So what if you have Spanish, Chinese, Japanese blood? Like, that doesn't make you any fucking less of anything else. So, we really have to change up that narrative too of what is like authentic and real, and because that
Yeah.
bugs me. Because then you're forcing yourself to be something you're not.
Yeah, that bugs me too. It's just like the Philippines has a history. So if your lineage is going to be part of that history, and that history like is going to be filled with other people as well, and that's fine. Like that's the history that your blood is literally the history of the Philippines.
Yes.
So I don't understand. Like, yeah, there should be no gatekeeping. Like, there's no gatekeeping. There doesn't need to be gatekeeping. There just needs to be more like talk about how there's so many different cultures and shit like that, because it's cool and we want to know and share, not because we want to compare ourselves and be like, who's more Filipino? Fuck that game. Fuck that game forever.
That's a dangerous conversation. I think that's I was speaking at UCSD at their high school conference, and I made the comment that, you're, even if you speak the language or not, like, you are still enough. Like, if I fucking look at you, you're brown as shit. Like, you're gonna be Filipina, whether you speak the language or not. At least to me, that's the attitude that I have. And I had one girl who came up to me after, and she was like crying, and she was like, "Oh my God, thank you for saying that," because she had cousins who came to visit from the Philippines, and they like ragged on her for not knowing that. They were like, she felt like shit. Like, she felt really, really bad. And I'm like, what you realize, she probably didn't know the language because their fucking moms were told by their teachers here not to speak to them in another. Like, you can't fault. It's not like she's ashamed or not wanting to be, Yeah. So just even me saying, like, or even having her tell someone who looks like us, tell her, like, you're enough.
Yeah.
You're enough. You're fine. Like, that was so tremendous for her. And so, just don't let other fucking people define you for yourself. Like, and again, like, that's up to you, right? To know what your culture is and be on it. That's on you. Don't let other people take shit away from you. Don't let other people make you feel like you're not enough of something. Like, that's something you're going to have to fight back too.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay. We're ending with that. That was amazing.
Beautiful.
It was amazing. Okay, tell us. Shameless plug. Who do you want to plug out?
I think I did all my plugs. Thank you for letting me do that. But everyone out there, all the folks I mentioned, and thanks for letting me do that, Trixie, because I know I plugged in a lot of folks and a lot of
please.
So, and you all make me who I am too, right? Like, I wouldn't be who I am today either without all the people around me.
Yeah, and this is how you can tell Kirin actually cares about community. Like, but it's true though. Community is sometimes just like thrown around all willy-nilly. I'm like, but do you actually?
What do you really mean by that? Oh, that's a whole
are you actually doing anything? Like, what do you mean? Do you mean just supporting your business? Because that's not community. That's supporting your business. Anyways, where do you have like do you have a professional Instagram where people can find you?
Yeah. Oh my God, what is it? Yes, on Instagram, I'm Professor. Oh yeah, I made it just for that. I am Professor Kirin Mac, MAC on Instagram. I also have a website, KirinMac.com. So, and Trixie tagged me on Golden Goddess too, so you can
Yes.
find me there. And
Will
yeah, if
also be in
any
the
of
show
you out
notes.
there have questions, hit me up.
Yes. Thank you so much for being on the
Thank
stream with me. This
you.
was super fun. I feel like we could have gone for 3 hours,
I know.
but let's not.
I
We'll
know.
just do more. Okay. Thank you to everyone who was watching, who will be listening in the future. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye.